Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this exclusive interview. Ukraine's counteroffensive against Russian forces continues to be a focal point in the ongoing conflict, with significant developments on multiple fronts. Despite some strategic gains, the situation remains tense, with Ukrainian forces facing severe resistance from Russia. Meanwhile, Russian forces are reportedly closing in on key Ukrainian-held towns, and the situation remains dynamic. Joining us today on TVP World to provide an update on Ukraine's counteroffensive is Louis Wierenga, lecturer in international relations, Baltic Defence College. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So the situation on the ground still remains very much dynamic. Can you give us an overview of the current state of Ukraine's counteroffensive? How effective has it been so far?
Well, it's been effective, but there's one important thing to note is that we're getting conflicting information from both sides. And Friday's bombing of the bridge will make it rather difficult for Russian forces to defend this particular area against Ukrainian advances, as well as accessing supplies. The Russian units in the area near the bridge are now caught between a river and kind of a hard place, and there are not many places for them to go at the moment. So if they're not able to resupply these units with ammo and fuel, then the Russian troops will have to retreat over the river. Now, Ukraine claims that it's taking control of 82 settlements in this Russian area of about 440 square miles or 1,500 square kilometers since the 6th of August when the incursion began. And the important thing is that this is notably political. So the Ukrainian government has said they do not aim to try and hold on to any Russian territory, none at all. This is used for upcoming negotiations to make it as fair as possible if Kiev has to sit down at the negotiation table with with the Kremlin. And I think everybody's just holding their breath until November 5th. And so the Ukrainians, as well as their partners, want to make sure that they're in the strongest possible point should it come to that.
Right, so like you mentioned, there's still a lot of fog of war going on and a lot of speculation about where things will go. Now, there's a few lines of deduction that people are turning to. One of it being, which you just mentioned, perhaps the most probable situation is that Ukraine wants to use that as a negotiation or a leveraging tool in the upcoming kind of discussion. However, there's also another theory that says that perhaps it is a way to try to divert Russians from going further into the Ukrainian Donbas region to pulling out some of its troops. Do you think that has been, that's a credible theory, seeing that the Russians seem to still have dug into that area?
Yeah, that's another important point to think. I mean, despite the gains made by Ukraine inside of Russian territory, nobody should forget about the importance of the front inside of Ukraine. So, the operation has been able to so far divert the weight of Russian air-delivered bombs away from Donbas, but that's largely seen to be temporary. While Ukraine is moving further and further into Western Russian territory, Russian forces are making gains, arguably on an almost near equal pace in the eastern part of Ukraine. So just before the weekend on Friday, Moscow said that Russian troops had captured Sarika. And this sort of latest advance brings Russian troops closer to Kursk, which is an important logistic hub that sits on the main road for supplies for Ukrainian troops along the Eastern Front. So, yes, I do think that that's another benefit of Ukraine's incursion into Russia, and it's worked so far. But I think that there's going to be a time where we're going to have to say, okay, the Ukrainians are going to have to say which front is more important, and it will depend on how far Russia can make gains inside of the eastern part. So there's almost a race of attrition on both sides by each.
All right, and like you mentioned, At the initial stages of this incursion into Russian territory, it has provided a great morale boost for the Ukrainians. However, now that people are looking at it from a more objective and kind of level-headed way, there's also some calculations that need to be made about like diverting so much resources into the incursion of Russia. Do you think that might actually leave the front line in Ukraine a little bit vacant, or do you think that would actually draw enough attention from the Russian troops in that area back into Russia to alleviate them from a little bit of stress there?
Well, I think that was largely a gamble, and I'm sure that went into Kiev's calculus when they made the decision. I mean, they had commendable OPSEC when they started this, so it was kept on very much the DL, and right now, this has just been a PR win for Ukraine because it's further laid bare the ineptness of Russian infantry when they try and defend Russian territory. I mean, this was supposed to have been the defense of the FSB and the National Guard, those who were tasked when Prigozhin kicked off his mutiny, and also in Chechnya in the early 2000s. And these were security services under Sergei Shoigu, who were supposed to be responsible for restoring order. And those were counter-terrorist operations. They weren't, regular Russian troops who were fighting in Russia's war of conquest against Ukraine. And that's obviously been a failure. And now that's destroyed Putin's narrative in the region, where some residents are reported saying they don't know who they're more furious at, Ukrainian troops or the government that was supposed to protect them and fail. So that's far enough away from Moscow that I don't think that Putin is worried about another Prigozhin incident, and Russian security services have been able to quell any unrest. So they're going to be able to sidestep that for now. But you make an important point that at some point in time, the Russians are going to try and cut off the supply line, and then that will be a different game changer.
And I would like to also draw attention to some of the Western weapon that was used during this incursion. We've seen British Challenger 2 tanks, artilleries from U.S. and Germany. Now, do you think this would also signify like a change in political attitude of these countries when it comes to allowing Ukraine to use some of these weapons, saying that there has been some success in the use of it, and well, a lot of the worry of escalatory into kind of NATO and the Western world did not really materialize?
Well, I guess both yes and no. I mean, they have had incremental steps in allowing Kiev to get more of the state-of-the-art weapons, and then to use them at first, signaling that no striking inside of Russia, and then yes, striking inside of Russia, and then even going inside of Russia. So I think right now this is probably a calculated decision on behalf of not just Kiev, but Washington, London, Paris, Berlin. And I think that what we can read out of this is that, yes, Western countries have always supported Ukraine, but now they're realizing that the longer this goes on, it's just going to be a more and more aggressive war of attrition with other theaters of conflict brewing around the world. And as I mentioned earlier in the interview, November 5th could potentially be a game changer depending on the outcome of the next U.S. election, and it's anybody's game right now. So I think right now Western countries are saying, let's do it. Of course, there is political worry. Moscow has noted that the bridge has been used by Western weapons when it was blown up recently. And right now, I think they're just trying to call Putin's bluff, because so far things have been pretty quiet from the Kremlin. If we look at the type of rhetoric that one could expect from Vladimir Putin, some of that's going on, but the usual finger wagging against the West and finger pointing has not been as extreme, which probably would indicate that Putin's feeling especially vulnerable right now.
It's very interesting. And you just mentioned something I think that's really important here about the election that's coming up. And this brings us to the timing of this particular incursion. Do you think that a lot of the timing of this particular operation has been decided because of the possibility of, less predictable future, and they feel the need to have some kind of bargaining chip if in case they are forced to come to a compromise, to a negotiation table with Russia with like solid concrete results?
Yeah, I mean, I think they want to go to the table with as much as is possible. And what they have done is they have come out and they're clearly ahead of the Stratcom here, because they have mentioned that they are not going to hold on to any of the territory inside of Russia. And they have not made arguably any friends inside of the immediate region. But what they have done is create some aggravation, large-scale aggravation from Russian residents in the region where Ukraine has moved into, directed towards the Kremlin. So I think that this was kind of where we were before this incursion, and this is a game changer, but we're still, I think, largely figuring out just how much that is, and that will unfold in days and weeks, not numerous weeks and months, let's say. So it'll be short term. We'll see what happens, how long the Ukrainians can hold ground. But I think that a lot of decision makers from different countries in both foreign and security policy fields were looking at this and saying, this is a war of attrition. The Russians are not really able to make any more inroads in, but they're able to bomb Ukraine in very vicious and despicable ways, targeting children's hospitals right before the NATO summit last month in Washington, for example. So I think this was a calculated risk. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what they can do, because, at the end of the day, even decades from now, the world will say, and the Ukrainians can say, that they have been the first troops to enter Russian soil since the Second World War. And that's got to be embarrassing for Putin. And that's something that everyone will always remember that they were able to do, regardless of the outcome.
Right, that's definitely a historical moment. And how do you see this turning out? I mean, how do you think this progresses if it does indeed go to a negotiation? Do you think that Ukrainian with maybe more bargaining chips on the table would give them an advantage? Or do you think the situation on the ground right now with this more escalatory form of fighting will actually anger Russia to kind of turn away from a so-called peace negotiation?
Well, I don't think that Russia is going to want to enter into a peace negotiation, and if they do, it'll be because their hand is tied by outside powers, probably the United States and/or China. China will play a big role in this due to their interesting relationship with the Russian Federation. Giving in and giving an inch for Russian President Vladimir Putin is not something that's in his character. So if he does do that, there are two things to worry about. A, he will not honor it, and he'll wait for a reason and an excuse to come back. I think that if he for some reason gets out of Ukraine, both the Ukrainians and the countries around and the global West are just going to be holding their breath and wait for them to come back. And I think the second thing is, if he does do that, then where else is he going to go? And I think that allied countries, especially on NATO's eastern flank, especially the northeastern part of that eastern flank, are going to be bracing and preparing for what comes next if he decides that he has a convenient off-road, because everything every decision that he makes, it's not for bringing peace in Ukraine. Certainly, it's for how he can currently strengthen his own position. And if it seems that there's no going forward, there's no pressing on with his mission, then there might be a period of, who knows, a couple of years, 2-3 years maybe, before they try and revamp. They have to get their personnel power back to where it would be to make an incursion somewhere else, and have to engage in this tech and AI race.
Right. So a lot of moving pieces still going into this. And of course, the situation is still unfolding. So meantime, thank you so much for helping us uncover what has been happening so far and giving it the context. Thank you for being with us on TVP World. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And with that, we conclude this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.